Good afternoon. Another episode of the Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A session. I'm Raphielle Johnson, once again joined by colleague Noah Rubin. Noah, 5 games last night. How's everything? And what was one of your takeaways from last night's games that you saw?
5 games, but they all started at the same time, which I don't know if there was a reason that the NBA did that. Maybe there was, but okay. So it was interesting. I was like, oh, I'll have everything prepped and ready. It'll be great. The games all end. I'll post them all and I'll go to bed. But it didn't end up working out like that. But
oh man,
I think the main takeaway, I don't know. I got a couple I really like, but the fact that the Thunder are rolling out this small ball lineup, I thought was one of the most exciting things. And I'm not sure if this was just directly correlated or it just happened, but SGA ended up having a career high 45 points, which was also a little bit surprising that he hadn't gotten to that number before, considering how many 30-plus point games he's had. So that was exciting. And then Brandon Boston Jr., he looks very legit. I think the most encouraging thing to me was that even when he wasn't hitting shots, which was the case in their last game after having a couple big scoring nights, he was still productive. Like the 10 assists, that was very surprising. And now with Jose Alvarado out for a while, maybe we'll see more big assist nights from him and Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, that's a good point. Trey Murphy, his first game back, 26 minutes. He didn't shoot the ball well, but you kind of expect that with the time off. He's going to need some time to get the rust off. But as soon as he can take on a full workload, I think his stock is going to rise dramatically out of need, just because they really don't have too many options on that roster. As you mentioned, Jose Alvarado going down, kind of a long-term injury, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't wonder if it might be Jalen Noel time. 11.6 assists last night in 22 minutes. No turnovers, too. So a good night from him in that 2-point defeat. So he'd be someone, Javonte Green, obviously not a point guard, but 3 steals last night. Maybe he's back on the radar in deep leagues as well at this point. So,
yeah, I mean, if they're a healthy body and they wear a Pelicans jersey, I think you pretty much have to at least consider streaming them. Yeah. Maybe dependent on league size, but if you're in a deeper league, you're going to be streaming players you didn't expect to be streaming in November.
Yeah, exactly. Also, we found out why you shouldn't give up on rookies so easily in terms of Misi. His night last night, really good too. 17-11, 2 assists, a steal, and a block shot. I feel like that's sustainable value for him because he's not really going to shoot outside of the paint. So high percentage shots, rebounds, and get a block in here. I think he can do that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was kind of cool to see because, like you said, we shouldn't necessarily give up on rookies immediately because they're going to have some very bad games and a lot of inconsistencies. He, I think, had 0 points and 1 rebound the game before in 20 minutes. And then he comes and has first double-double, career highs for both points and rebounds. So, yeah, I think that the solid, field goal percentage, rebounds, and blocks should be pretty reliable, like the classic big man stats. And then anything else could just kind of be a little bit of a boost. But with the amount of injuries they have, they're going to need Misi very early on in his career to step up.
Exactly. I'm sure we'll get to Norman Powell at some point in this Q&A session because he's been outstanding. But go ahead and get to a question that the first viewer, he asked it a couple hours ago, and it looks like he already answered it by going through with this. So Ryan asked, would you do Jordan Poole and Zach LaVine for Alperen Şengün? 12-team ESPN points league. I have too many players in my IR is healthy, so I'd like to keep Amen Thompson or Tari Eason going forward. And he follows that up with, I did it and don't feel great, but he can hold on to Amen and Tari. I actually think that's a good trade. If you're looking to clear out a space on your roster just in case, just when those guys get back healthy that you have in your IR, I would do that for sure just because of Şengün's overall value. Jordan Poole's been outstanding to start the season. I just don't know if what he's providing now is sustainable for the whole year. So I have no problem with that. Zach LaVine's been really good too. I think he's going to settle in about top 50 type player, some of that effect. So I would do that. I had no problem with that trade personally.
Yeah, I agree. Jordan Poole's already starting to regress a little bit. I mean, he's
Hmm.
still over the course of the year. This is obviously a points league, not 9 cat, but he's a third rounder at 9 cat. But the
Yeah.
past couple of weeks, that value has dropped off significantly. He's not, I think I don't remember if we were doing. It may have been the podcast we were doing with Dan, and he was
Hmm.
shooting like 60% from three at one point. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like that wasn't that was never going to
Hmm.
be sustainable. That's
Hmm.
okay. So that's already started to drop down. Now it's down to 42%. So like
Yeah.
I expect that to continue to kind of regress a little bit. So I think it was very much still like a sell high on Jordan Poole. And
Hmm.
then, I mean, Şengün's going to be phenomenal. Zach Levine, he's been pretty good, but yeah, I'd rather have Şengün than both of them combined. Plus, Ahmed and Tari have both been, I mean, they combined for 13 stocks last night. That's
Yeah.
nuts.
That's. I think with Houston, you're just kind of waiting for the point where they strongly consider putting those two in the starting lineup. I think their one change would be pretty easy in terms of removing Dylan Brooks, and if you want to add the other one in there as well, who comes out? If it's Fred Van Vliet, then you're asking Jalen Green to basically run the point. I don't know if he's there yet, but he does make them more dynamic when he has the basketball in his hands. So him, Jabari Smith Jr., I don't know, but I think Amin and Tari both have to play a lot of minutes for this team moving forward.
Yeah, and I think if there were to be a starting lineup change, because I mean, Fred VanVleet was out last night, and Ime Udoka
Mhm.
was kind of like, pretty much if any of our starters are out, Amin Thompson's going to slide in as the
Yeah.
starter, which I think is good for his value. But I think if it were just like a starting lineup change and you wanted to get both of them in there, I'm not saying this will happen or should happen, but if that were to happen, Dylan Brooks and I think Jabari Smith would probably be the ones that I would take out
Yeah.
because he has he's really struggled to start this
Mhm.
season. 39% from the floor, 25% from three. Like, yeah, I mean, with how well Tari Easton's played, that would be a nice switch there. So we'll see. I mean, having those guys off the bench is certainly not going to hurt the team. So we'll see
Mhm.
what Udoka decides to do.
All right. Paolo asks, is it time to stash Alshar Thompson? 14 team, 9 cat. Yes.
Agree.
If you can afford it on your roster, I would definitely stash him because his skill set is really similar to his twin brother in terms of what they provide fantasy wise. Not going to get much in terms of the shooting. 3-point shot is going to be non-existent, but the rebounding, the defensive stats, I think he's definitely worth holding on to in a category league.
Yeah, and you got to think that like the category league, especially 14 team, a little bit deeper, 100%. It's a new coaching staff. JB Bickerstaff, we don't know exactly how he's going to use him, but I would assume that if he doesn't start, that he's playing a significant role off the
Yeah.
bench, probably like more than Ron Holland has been, taking some of those minutes. But we also have to remember that Monty Williams was practically actively trying to take Asar Thompson's stats and his spot in the rotation, despite an incredibly strong start to last season. So if, I'm not saying he'll get 35 minutes a game or anything, but if he's getting 25 minutes, the rebounds and stock should both, or I guess all, be very, very effective.
Don't ever hire someone where you have to keep rising the price in order to get them to coach. That's what we learned from last year.
That's
So
just any job. That's not even, I guess.
that's a good point. Yeah. Another question. I'm going to assume that's Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal or Arsar Thompson, 14 team Roto. I think I'd go Royce here, actually. I say
Mm,
that because you've got the Kevin Durant injury. That'll
yeah.
give him a boost early on. But I think what Royce has done thus far, he can sustain that. I don't think it's unrealistic for the rest of the season. So, as you mentioned, Noah, I don't know if you're gonna have the same answer. You probably didn't sound like you would, but we don't know how Alshar is going to be used in that rotation. I assume he's going to play a good number of minutes, but is it starter's role coming off the bench? I would assume he's going to come off the bench just because that lineup needs Tim Hardaway shooting. But I think we know a little bit more about Royce right now, and that's why I would take Royce in terms of Roto.
Yeah, I'm like this is like a good question, I think. And I think the fact that it
Yeah.
is Roto definitely alters my answer because
Mhm.
like you said, Royce O'Neal's, gonna get a little bit of a boost from KD being out. He's been very good already this year. He's 6th rounder on Basketball Monster. And Asar Thompson, we don't know exactly how JB Bickerstaff's going to use him. Now, in the best case scenario where he's grabbing 8 rebounds and adding 3 stocks or something, he's probably going to tank your free throw percentage. He's not going to give you anything with threes, maybe a little bit of value to assist. The field goal percentage might not be great. Whereas Royce O'Neal has been pretty well rounded. So I think in a roto format, just in a vacuum, then I would say I would lean Royce O'Neal. Now there could be a specific scenario where it's like, oh, my roto team's already very strong with threes and field goal percentage and free throws, and I'm not, too worried about Asar Thompson tanking that. And the upside of the rebounds and stocks is something that I really need. In which case, then I'd go Asar.
Yeah. Let's see. Shaz, what is your take on Matas Buzelis? Do you think he will start over Patrick Williams anytime soon?
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't think he will, just because they paid Patrick Williams $90 million. Again, I need to know who the Bulls were bidding against, because I'm happy for him. He got his money. We like to see people get paid, but $90 million for what he's brought to the table, they have to believe an awful lot in his upside. And for that reason, I don't think they would pull the plug on Patrick Williams starting anytime soon. As for Buzelis, I like his game. He needs to get stronger. I think that's the big thing you kind of notice watching him. He's a bit, a slender frame. He kind of gets knocked off his spot pretty easy. I think that's something that he'll get better at as the season progresses. He gets used to the contact, but I think he's more of a dynasty play instead of someone who's going to help you out this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Chicago, despite trading DeMar this offseason, is still kind of treating this like we're going to do our best to finish 2 games below 500 and make the play-in. So they're not going to pull the plug on Patrick Williams and Vooch and Zach LaVine to give these young guys minutes anytime soon. Now, if we get close to the trade deadline and they're just not anywhere close to the play-in tournament, then maybe. But just based on the history of what Chicago has done in recent years, I'm not confident that Buzelis starts anytime soon, because you also got to think, like, they're 4-7 right now. And that's 9th in the East, because literally everybody stinks except the Cavs and Celtics, at least, when looking at records. So like they could be sub 500 and, in theory, just based off game, like, not to hate on your Knicks, but they're 4-5 and the 6th seed. The Magic and Nets are the 4 and 5 seeds at 5 and 6. So like, I don't know. It's early, but it doesn't look like it's going to take a great record to be in the playoffs in the East. And maybe Chicago takes that as, let's try and make the play-in tournament again. Woo!
Yeah.
So I don't trust them.
Yeah, for the sake of that fan base, I kind of hope they just pull the plug and figure out a way to trade someone at or before the deadline.
Yeah.
All right. JJ Styles asked, do you drop Alex Caruso or Shaedon Sharpe for Asar Thompson for the rest of the season play? I know I'm not dropping Shaedon Sharpe, because you look at that Portland roster, he's essentially the only 2 guard they have on it. And that's a big reason why he jumped into the starting lineup, like, his second game back. He replaced Denny Avdia, so Avdia is kind of taking a hit in terms of fantasy value and minutes. So I would not drop Shaedon Sharpe for Alsar. That much I'll say for sure.
Yeah, I think I would drop Caruso. He hasn't been what we expect him to be with the Thunder. I think when they traded Josh Giddey for him, the expectation was, he's going to start. But I guess that might, I don't know. It could be a number of factors, like they're prioritizing the playoffs and having him healthy then, because he hasn't been able to be healthy in a while. And then also maybe they didn't view the trade as, we're getting this, we're having to give up this former lottery pick. It's, they viewed Josh Giddey as the negative asset that I think a lot of other people did. It was just kind of something to bring in a veteran. So he's played less than 20 minutes per game. Without Chet in their last game, he played less than 20 minutes. So he just hasn't been great for fantasy. And so I think it's fine to drop him for the upside of Asar. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. So, like you said, he only played 20 minutes last night without Chet. That's a bit of a concern in terms of his fantasy value. All right. Steve on Planet Burner asks, given the recent news on Chet Holmgren, What do you think Hartenstein's value is at the moment? I'm going to look up how long Hartenstein is out for.
That's what I was about to pull up too, so I'll let you do that. But I think that is kind of the biggest factor because I don't remember it off the top of my head when he's supposed to return. But I mean, if
looks like it could be towards the end of this month. He reevaluated in 5 to 6 weeks from October 17th. So,
okay, so like early December return, which I think Chet is not going to be back until like reevaluated mid to late January, and it could be later than that. So I'd say Hartenstein's value is pretty high. I mean, I don't know if you could put an exact number on it, but the fact that, he's not necessarily definitely going to be back in November or December, or like early December, like they might, not want to rush him back if they're able to win games with this smaller lineup. So I'd say his value is definitely increased since Chet went down, but I can't say by how much.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd expect much more than like 7th round value in standard leagues, just because we need to see how that lineup meshes together in terms of how he plays off of SGA and Jalen Williams. So I think middle round, I think that's fair expectation for Hartenstein once he gets his legs underneath him. All right, Sid asks, better guy the roster for the next couple of weeks, Kevin Huerter or Isaiah Joe? I think I'd go red. I think I'd go Red Velvet, just because he's going to be an unquestioned starter. In terms of Isaiah Joe, he's definitely playing rotation minutes, but that 5th starter spot's rotated almost by the game based on matchups. Either he, Aaron Wiggins, or Cason Wallace. So I think he'll get his minutes, but I think I would rather have Huerter rostered as a starter, being able to play off of those playmakers, and I think he's gonna have no problem hitting or exceeding 30 minutes per night for these next few weeks while Malik is down.
Yeah, I was going to say with Malik Monk being down, that definitely does help Huerter. I think it helps Keon Ellis more, even though both kind of sucked last night. I mean, like it was not, because I remember I was messaging with somebody about, whether they should add Keon Ellis. I was like, I would try. I was like, I was like, oh gosh, I feel bad for recommending to add him. Anyways, he'll be fine. But Isaiah Joe started in their last game, but like you said, it has been that kind of rotation, and it wouldn't shock me if it continued to be a rotation. He just rotated 2 spots instead of 1, just with Chet out. So does that mean maybe more starts for Isaiah Joe? Maybe, but the only thing he's really consistently given is 3s. So yeah, I think Huerter's probably the safer option, unless, which we don't know if this is the case or not, because even when everyone's healthy, like Mark Daigneault is not gonna announce his starting lineup or his rotation earlier than he has to, like 30 minutes before the game. So if Isaiah Joe continues to start, I mean, their last night, 12 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals, block, 2 threes. Like, I don't think we can expect that from him. But if he starts doing things like that, then that'd be great. But Huerter's a much safer option.
All right, James asks, what's the trade value for Jabari Smith Jr., if any?
So low, I guess. I don't know.
I think he's a buy low guy at this point. And even then, that's a significant risk that you're taking, just because it doesn't really seem like a good fit. Maybe he'd benefit from being moved to the bench, be kind of one of the offensive focal points for the second unit. It feels like he turns down a lot of opportunities within that offense. You got Şengün, Jalen Green on the floor, and Fred VanVleet too. So I think if there's a lineup change, it may ultimately work in his favor if he were to be moved to the bench.
Yeah, I think that would. I don't know if maybe it would help him. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, you can't guarantee that, obviously.
Right. It's like, I mean, like it might, but I think there's also just a fairly, I don't know. I mean, Udoka seems to be pretty loyal to his lineups. Doesn't seem like he's going to be like a guy that's going to change them unless he like really feels good about it. So I don't know. I think losing out on minutes is probably more likely. We've seen him do that in the past with Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün. But the thing of it is I don't think he's going to do that with a guy that's playing good defense. And even if he's not getting defensive numbers, like Jabari Smith is a good defender, and that's what Ime Udoka wants. So, that's kind of like getting off on a tangent. But as far as what his trade value is, like he doesn't have much at this point, and
Yeah.
unless he just simply starts hitting more shots, I'm not optimistic that he's going to be better than he already has been.
Mhm.
Which I mean, it'll get better. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't imagine he's going to shoot 25% from three for an entire season, but I don't know how much better.
Hmm. Realistic expectations for Keon Ellis the next 2 weeks. I mean, I guess late round value would be realistic. Not expecting much more from him, you know.
Yeah, I think so. This year he's averaging 0.9 threes, 0.8 blocks, and a steal and a half.
Mhm.
I mean, I could see him getting over 1 3, over 1 block, and I mean, I don't want to say 2 steals, but like 1.7, 1.8 steals.
Yeah.
So like those are 3 categories that I think he can impact. Now, obviously, last night he had 1 3 and 2 steals in 23 minutes. Like it was a bad game for them all around. So I think realistic would be, yeah, like late round value, maybe borderline top 125. But
Mhm.
because he's able to make a really big impact with steals and blocks, he could easily, like, that could easily look much better if he's
Mhm.
getting back to what he did, I guess, late last season when he was getting like pretty consistently 5 stocks a game.
Yeah. Why is Crusoe's ownership percentage so high? Do you think his minutes or role increase as the season progresses? Ugh.
I
I
think
don't know.
it's probably high off name value. Like to answer the
Yeah.
first question,
Hmm.
it's okay that this guy has been very good in the past. The Thunder are going to be good this year. They acquired him, like we kind of talked about for Josh Giddey,
Hmm.
and so you expect them to use him, and so that's why he was drafted a lot. And I'm assuming it's still high because probably some leagues have already fallen off and they don't care to drop him or whatever. Um, but as far as his minutes or role increasing as the season progresses, I do think it will, especially as we get closer to the playoffs. I'm not saying he's going to get closer to 30 minutes per game, but playing less than 20 to this point, I expect that would go up. And then probably actually during the playoffs, I expect him to play a lot more, like closer to 28,
Hmm.
30 minutes per game. Like, I get that they like Aaron Wiggins, they like Isaiah Joe. Like, both those guys are very, very good. And Casey Wallace, all three of them. But I think deferring a little bit more to the veteran who's been there before is definitely something I could see them doing doing more of as the playoffs approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I think that's the thing. Like, is it going to impact your roster in fantasy playoff time? You know,
Right.
because I don't know if it depends. I don't really know how so many managers can afford to wait that long. Just because you get 67% rostered right now. It's probably going to stay about the same just because of the Holmgren injury, but the numbers really don't back that up. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I just think they have so many options on the wings that his ceiling's it's low in Oklahoma City compared to what it was in Chicago. All right, let's see. Should we replace Jose Alvarado now that he is out for 6 weeks? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
By the time he gets back, I assume that you're going to have at least DeJounte Murray, if not he and CJ McCollum back on the floor. So it's just going to be the standard backup point guard role for Alvarado at that point, and I don't think he's worth rostering in that situation.
Yep.
All right. Would you drop Kawhi for Isaiah Hartenstein? 14 team, 1 IL plus spot. He's got Chet and John Morant as well. That man.
I don't think I would want to drop Kawhi.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel good about. I got asked earlier if I would drop Zion. I was like, I get why you're thinking about it, but I think just what
Mhm.
he does when he's on the court, and it's almost like a lack of clarity around the situation. That's also like if I knew, okay, 2 more months he's out, that helps me make a better answer.
Yeah.
Kawhi could come back next week, and
Hmm.
like, I mean, it would be probably a little bit surprising if he did, but they haven't given an update, so Kawhi could easily just be like back in 3 games, and Isaiah Hartenstein isn't going to be back until, I mean, probably early December, best case
Hmm.
scenario. So I don't think I'd feel comfortable dropping Kawhi.
Yeah, I also get why the last update on Kawhi was in late October, and it simply said he's expected to play this season. Like, all
Okay.
right, thanks. But that's tough. You only have one IO plus spot and Chet and Ja Morant on your roster too. So I would say stash Kawhi there, but you can't do that, obviously. I would not drop him unless your center position is just in dire need of help. And even then, I'd have to strongly consider just gutting it out because he's a guy when on the floor, he's like a top 10 fantasy player. So I don't think I can just drop a player of that potential, even though we don't know when or if he'll be back on the court this season. All right. Is Herb Jones or Chris Middleton worth a stash in 12-team category?
Sure.
I guess Herb would be more worthy of that, in my opinion. Chris Middleton had both of his ankles operated on. Like, it sounds like he's getting closer, but I don't trust a player in that type of injury situation to give you proper fantasy value. So I think I would stash Herb if you can afford it, just because of the defensive potential, especially if you have enough scoring on the rest of your roster too to make up for any points you may lose going with Herb over Middleton.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, Chris Middleton have obviously a lot of injury issues in the past.
Mm-hmm.
We've also seen where he misses the start of the year, he comes back and they play him 20 minutes per game. They rest him back to backs.
Yeah.
He misses more time. Like, if I have nobody else to stash, then sure, I'll stash Chris Middleton just for the sake. But I would probably feel more comfortable stashing Herb Jones. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's up, guys? What's up, man? Quick question. What do you guys think about Kuzma or D'Angelo Russell for a 20-team points league? Who would be better throughout the season?
I think Kuz is just iffy just because, like, they might shut him down at some point. So I think it kind of depends on your league settings with that as well. I assume that D'Angelo Russell will continue to play for the Lakers until the trade deadline. And then I don't know, because it already he's been in trade rumors for years, but it seems like maybe it would actually happen by the trade deadline this year, in which case we have no idea where he would end up. So, I mean, it would depend on your point scoring settings. I would assume that Kuz is the better option short term, but I think over the course of the season, I almost feel a little bit more comfortable with D'Angelo Russell, just off the sense I think he plays more games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Kuzma just returned from injury. That demotion to the bench for Russell, I don't know. You understand why it happened given the sequence that we watched in that Grizzlies game last week. But yeah, I don't know. I think Kuzma, you look at that roster, they've got promising players who can play his position. So he's someone that I could see being a shutdown candidate after the trade deadline, because this isn't going to be a playoff or play-in team. So I think I would go Russell, but I don't really feel too good about that.
Yeah, and I think D'Lo has been pretty solid off the bench. Like, in the 2 games, 18, 2-3 and 2 threes, and then 15, 2-1-1 and 3 threes. So I don't know, maybe that's what he kind of needed. Like, the numbers won't have quite the same upside as they did as a starter, but it's almost like a reality check. Like, oh, like, I get it now. Things like that can't happen. Like, a little bit of a motivating thing. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. With the Pelicans essentially having an emergency room for a roster, what are your thoughts on players like Javonte Green and Jalen Noel?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that they're not super exciting or reliable streaming options, but like we kind of said at the very beginning, you kind of have to, or it's fine to stream anybody in New Orleans that's a healthy body.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. It's pretty crazy how many injuries they've had on that roster. And they're not even I think they're about 10 games into the season. So, yeah.
Goodness.
All right. Another Pelicans question. Alvarado missed at least 6 weeks. Brandon Boston Jr. is going to eat. Will he somehow lead to opening a bigger long-term role for Boston, or will he disappear later?
I think he's kind of. It's an iffy one because it depends on what you mean by long-term role.
Yeah.
Like if you're saying 25 to 30 minutes per game, like that's just not going to happen when everybody's healthy, and it's not a knock on him, but it's the amount of money that they've invested in these very talented players. But I think what he's done could keep him seeing 15 minutes per game. But I guess it's kind of unreal how many injuries, because I mean, Trey Murphy's just now got back, but Zion's still out. And then DeJounte, CJ McCollum, Jordan Hawkins, if the entire team somehow manages to be healthy at once, I think that Brandon Boston's probably like the ninth man.
Yeah.
And has he earned or played well enough for them to prioritize him over Jordan Hawkins, the guy they just drafted in the first round like a couple years? Like I guess it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think so, but so I could see him getting 10 to 15 minutes per game later in the season when the team's healthy, but it's probably not enough to really impact fantasy this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like for a bigger role for him, given the career history, it'll be like a back of the rotation, sticking there. So I don't really think that's going to be enough for fantasy value, but he's played well enough. I think he can earn himself a spot on the back end, but fantasy-wise, it's really not going to have much of an impact.
Yeah.
All right. It's all about the Bub Carrington bandwagon here. Parker asked 2 questions. Zach Edey or Bub Carrington rest of the season 9 cat head-to-head, and then Peyton Pritchard or Bub Carrington.
Jeez, tough ones.
Yeah, those are difficult ones for sure. I would hold Edey just because I think his role is starting to expand a bit in terms of how many minutes he plays. And he's going to be a starter down there in Memphis. So I think I would go with him. As for Pritchard or Bub, oh, man. I think I would lean Bub.
It's tough.
That's a really tough one because it's not like Pritchard's going to drop out of the rotation once Porzingis returns. And that may not happen until December or January. So you'll have a bit of a runway to establish him further. And then after Kristaps returns, you also have the Al Horford back-to-back factor to consider too. So I think those are all really good questions. I think with any rookie in a rebuild, you're kind of worried about the efficiency stats. But I think Bub has been solid in that regard this far. So that's a really good question. I'd lean Bub, but I would not have a beef with anyone who said Pritchard.
Yeah, I think if these are the 3 you're deciding between, then you're in a pretty good spot. I mean,
you did a good job drafting.
Right. If it's like an 8 or 10 team league, it makes a little bit more sense. But if this is like a 12 team league, then goodness gracious, you're in a good spot.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go wrong with any of these guys because Bub and Zach Edey are going to continue to start for the rest of the year. Peyton Pritchard's been the best in fantasy so far. He might see a little bit of a hit, I guess, second half of the year when the team gets healthy, but that's also the time when they're like 20 games ahead of everybody in the standings. And, with the way Cleveland's played, I don't think that they'll be that much further ahead that they actually just like totally just stop playing basketball for like a month. But I think that if they're content with being a 2 seed, then they could probably start resting guys very early, which means it's Peyton Pritchard season. It's just going to go ahead and throw this out there as far as which one I'm streaming tonight or in the short term. Peyton Pritchard is probably going to drop 30 on the Hawks tonight. So don't drop. If you're going to drop him, don't drop him yet. Drop him after tonight. So, yeah, either that or Sam Hauser's going to hit like 9 threes. It's one of the two. That's just the way things go.
All right. Chad asked if I'd consider playing for the Pelicans on a 10-day. I think I can get the contract for him since they are starting a ham sandwich, a paperclip, and Air Bud right now. I appreciate the comment. I'm in pretty good shape, but if you put me in New Orleans, I'd eat myself out of the league within a month. I don't think so. It wouldn't be good. So
y'all heard it here first. The only reason Raph isn't on a 10-day is because the New Orleans food is way too good. That's the only reason.
All right, and a more serious question is Brandon Boston in that Chris Dunn zone where more opportunity may make his game a net negative. Field goal percentage is bouncing between unusable and average game to game. I think that's a good question. 3 for 13 last night. I think that kind of goes to what is your roster build? Like who else is on your roster? If you have a bunch of guys who shoot a good field goal percentage, you'd probably be okay. Or you may have to just punt if you don't have many of those guys. But yeah, I think it's all about your roster build. But I think overall he'll be even. I don't think he'll be a net negative because I think the field goal percentage is like the biggest concern there.
Yeah, I think the numbers that he's put up recently almost kind of make people forget what type of player he is or what he was.
Mm-hmm.
Like the expectation was that if this guy's going to be playing in the league, it's just because he can get buckets and like that's what he's going to do. And a lot of times guys like that are inconsistent and have some very atrocious shooting nights, and because they're literally professional scorers, they're going to continue to shoot. But I think like I said, I think this a little bit earlier. I mean, we've talked about the Pelicans half the time, which is fine, but like he's doing things other than scoring, which I think like encourages me as far as how valuable he can be in fantasy until everybody gets healthy. So I'm not too concerned about some poor shooting nights, especially when he's probably the second best. Maybe Trey Murphy's back to third best scoring option on the team right now. It's a very different role for him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think he's shooting 46% from the field right now. So it's not like he's been bad in that regard, just had a bad game basically. So I think he'll be fine. Yeah, I think he's certainly someone you have to have roster at this point, given the state of that roster. When is Nick Richards expected back? Is he worth a stash? Now, last week when they announced that he had the rib fracture, it was announced that he'd be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So you've got at least another week to wait there. Then after that, it's about, okay, progress made and also conditioning too. So I think if you're thinking positively about this, I'd say about 2 weeks total before he gets back. But Charlotte's been notorious about how they really haven't been too forthcoming with the injury-related information. So I think he's worth a stash just because we don't know when Mark Williams is going to play either. So it seems that Richards may be closer to a return than Williams. So I would probably stash him if you can afford to do so.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like you said, the reevaluation date would be a week from yesterday.
Yeah.
And then, it might be later that week, might be another week. It could be 3 months. Who knows? It's Charlotte. So we're not confident that this is an accurate timeline just because of what we've seen in the past. Now, could he be back soon? Sure. But I think he is worth stashing because I am confident that he plays this season plays again before Mark Williams returns. I have zero clue, and I don't think anybody has any clue as to when Mark Williams is going to be back.
Okay. Noah Clowney flashed his upside last night, but is largely inconsistent. Will he continue to be a drag until silly season, 12-team 9-category league, or do you hold him? Looks like redraft and keeper. So I'll let you go and answer this first.
In redraft, I'm not worried about holding him, especially in a 12-team league. I mean, he did have a good night last night by hitting some threes. But with Ben Simmons seeing time at center and Nick Claxton there, like he's not going to play enough to be worth rostering in a 12-team league. Now, when does silly season start for the Nets? I don't know. Is that January? Is it February? Is it March? We're not really sure at this point. We'll see how the season continues to play out. In keeper leagues or Dynasty, I'm probably not going to drop him. I guess it would depend on your keeper format. Like if it's a league, you keep 2 players, then no, I'm probably treating it more like a redraft league. But if it's closer to a dynasty format, then I think his upside's too high to drop him.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, we kind of touched on this earlier. Is D'Angelo Russell going to turn it around? I hope so, because I don't know if they can sustain starting Cam Reddish for the entire season. So
We can't.
I guess
I'm not gonna participate in hating on Cam Reddish.
I'm not. Hey,
That's my sweet prince, Raph.
I'm not hating on the
Be a
man.
star. He could be a star if he was managed right. Just kidding. I mean, I'm not, but but D'Angelo Russell, I think turning it around, like it depends on your definition. Could he be better than he is? Yes. Is he going to be like I don't remember what his ADP was off the top of my head, but I feel like it was like top 80 at least, maybe even top 70. I don't think he gets anywhere close to that.
75 was the Yahoo ADP.
Yeah, like I don't think he gets anywhere close to that. Right. Especially now with Cam Reddish kind of finally having his breakout season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is Jordan Clarkson only a stream for the strong schedule? Then drop him. Now let me pull up their schedule to see what we're working with here. The remainder of this week, you've got 4 games: Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they're active. That Thursday game is a prime streaming spot because it's just them and the Mavericks playing. Saturday, 5-game slate too. So pretty good slate for the remainder of this week. Yeah, I think that's fair. You go ahead and drop them, depending on who's on your waiver wire that you can get. But yeah, I think it would be fair just because I don't really see too much value coming from any of those guards right now. Even with Keontae George injured, I don't know. Colin Sexton's probably the best of the bunch from a fantasy standpoint, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would say definitely stream for the schedule and then evaluate at the end of the week. Like if Jordan, because he is obviously an incredibly good scorer and can be very good in fantasy, but the rotations and stuff have been weird. Like if something changes, like I'm not going to tell you on Tuesday to definitely drop this guy Sunday because so many things can change between now and then, which is my little asterisk caveat there. But yeah, I think stream for the strong schedule for sure.
All right. Are you guys expecting a high jump on Brandon Miller's value with Miles Bridges out the next 2 weeks? I think it's already started. He's top 15 over the last week. So I don't see a reason why Brandon Miller can't continue that unless he were to get injured himself. So I am expecting a high jump from him.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. What's up, Michael? Wondering if Kelly Oubre should be dropped in a 12-team 9-category league. I also have Stewart that can be dropped. I assume that's Isaiah Stewart. Could pick up Grant Williams, Stephon Castle, or Shaden Sharp. I think I'd drop Oubre for either Castle or Sharp. I think Castle's been better recently. So, yeah, I think dropping him for one of those 2 guys I'd be fine with. I'm not picking up Grant Williams. No, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think Stewart you can probably drop when Duran's back. He's questionable tonight, so I don't know. Maybe you'll get another game or 2 out of Isaiah Stewart as a starter, which I'd take that over Kelly Oubre right now. I think Castle's the one I feel best about. It seems like they're taking Shaden Sharp, like kind of bringing him along a little bit slow. He did start, but the minutes still haven't been there. Yeah, I'd probably be dropping Oubre for Castle. I agree.
All right. How much is Messi impacted by the bad news for Zion? Will he lose value once Herb rightfully reclaims the starting center role? I don't know if Herb's going to reclaim that role, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know. Maybe they can start Zion at center once he's back healthy, but start him as the biggest player on the floor. But defensively, I don't really know how that's going to work. Like, maybe they're worried more about hurting someone's feelings by telling them they're going to come off the bench. But I kind of feel like Yves Missi needs to be the starter from this point forward.
Yeah, I think with the amount of injuries that they have, I don't think that it's a pretty low chance, or it's going to take a while before they're healthy enough where it's a decision whether or not to start Yves Missi. Because one, he's been inconsistent, but shown just how good he can be. So I don't think that they're going to just willingly bench him at this point. And when Herb Jones returns, if it's also we're talking about when DeJounte and CJ McCollum are back, then maybe that's more of a conversation. But Zion's not back, so you're not going to start Brandon Ingram at center. I don't think that they're legitimately going to start Herb Jones at center, especially not long term. Maybe like a situational thing. But I have to look back at. Did they ever like I know there was like reports that they were going to do that. I don't think that they actually did it. I think they started Daniel Tice like once or twice.
Yeah.
And then so I don't think Herb Jones is going to actually truly be like a starting center.
Yeah, it's either been Tice or Misi in the starting lineup for every game thus far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd expect that to be I expect Misi just hold on to that role moving forward.
Yep.
All right. Thoughts on Daniel Gafford and 12-team 9K head-to-head? Should I hold or look to trade?
He's been seeing a little bit, I guess, really just their last game. Like Derek Lively had already missed a few, but just last game finally got over or close to 34 minutes per game. Probably, I guess a little bit of a matchup dependent thing, trying to slow down Jokic. But if you're going to trade him, I would try and trade him now because I think Lively's questionable tonight and his returns are going to drop Gafford right back to 20 minutes. And, he can be good in 20 minutes per game, but it's mostly just because of the sky high field goal percentages. Numbers are inflated. So, yeah, to me, I was staying away unless it was incredibly late round pick. I think I do have Derek Lively in one league, but I got him like a couple of rounds after Gafford went. I was staying away from them because it never seemed like it was going to be a true minute split. Like they like to, slide in some Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell minutes. So it wasn't like a true 24-24 split consistently. So I was staying away from them in most of my drafts. So I would be trying to trade them if I could.
Yeah, I think the infatuation with Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber, it's kind of befuddling, but hey, they pay him to coach, not me. Are we just so conditioned to the Grizzlies starting lineup being injured at this point that it's just more interesting to talk about the Pelicans? I mean, people had questions about the Pelicans, so we answered them. I'm just saying, like that.
Don't shoot the messenger.
We had more questions about them, but I think with the Grizzlies at this point, it's Scottie Pippen Jr. season. For one, maybe Jalen Wells. He hasn't been the most efficient in terms of the shooting numbers, but I think Scottie Pippen Jr. is the one that has to be targeted in terms of fantasy right now while they're dealing with their injuries. Marcus Smart, he's questionable, so he could be back, but could be back pretty soon. But even then, they're not going to rush him back out onto the floor in terms of playing heavy starters minutes. So, yeah, Scottie Pippen Jr., 50% rostered in Yahoo right now. So I think he's the one to definitely look at. I'd probably keep an eye on John Conchar as well, just to see what he gives the next few games, see if he's worth streaming for a little bit.
Or maybe people are just like used to the Grizzlies being hurt because it happened all last season. Everybody just kind of knows what to do. You're streaming this player that you didn't have on your radar before the season. They're going to be really good, and it's going to be cool. Jay Huff has been awesome. Limited minutes though, so I don't know if you're really feeling comfortable streaming him consistently. Jake LaRavia has been playing a large role. Like most of these guys that you didn't have in your queue at any point of your 12-team draft are contributing at a high level. So yeah, it's they're difficult to manage. It's not as bad as last year, but I'd say that's what it is.
All right. Will you try to trade for Kristaps Porzingis now? If so, what's fair trade value for him? I don't think I'd do that right now. I think I'd try to give it a little more time just to see any more injury updates before making a move, because we've heard about a potential target date, December or January, but we haven't heard like a recent status update in terms of how his rehab's going. So I would probably wait to hear about that before I considered making a move for him.
I think the only scenario where Porzingis, or I guess I'd say the main scenario where Porzingis should be traded at this point is if he's on a bad team, like a team that's losing, needs help now, and you have a good record and you're like, oh, I can afford to stash Porzingis because I've gotten off to a good start. Hey, I'm going to undersell you and give you this guy that is significantly worse when they're both healthy, but is actually healthy right now. You take him and I'll take Porzingis, and then it helps both teams. So I think that's a scenario, and fair trade value is going to be nowhere near what I guess an actual fair trade would be, if that makes sense without sounding like just contradictory. But basically, if you're going to trade for Kristaps, you need to be underselling somebody and giving them a significantly worse player for it to make sense.
All right. Dynasty question. I'm trying to sell high on Buddy Hield's hot start. I'm using Desmond Bane to make him more enticing. Should I be targeting someone in the 20 to 30 range, or higher or lower?
I'd say 20 to 30 is pretty fair. I haven't done rankings since our draft guide, and I don't have what I had Bane at early, but I feel like it was late 30s. So I think 20 to 30 range is very fair, probably closer to 30 than to 20, because I mean, in dynasty leagues, if you're going to give up a top 20 to 30 guy, like Buddy Hield is not a needle mover to me. So even if you're getting Desmond Bane back, it would take a pretty specific roster setup for that to be something that I would do. But I think that is the range in which you should be targeting somebody.
Yeah, I have no arguments with that. I think that's a fair range. Okay. Dante DiVincenzo is performing more like he did in New York as of late. Will he provide similar value in Minnesota once they've all gelled more? I don't know if I would go that high, because he had like an all-time season for himself last year. So I don't know that you're talking like what? I think he's about like a 5th rounder last year. I don't think he can get that high in the bench role. He'll have the playmaking opportunities just because that bench really kind of hasn't. I don't know, man. Like you got the Mike Conley situation, and DiVincenzo can make plays with the ball in his hands. Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, they can all do those things. Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. So I think early on it kind of stunted DiVincenzo's growth, but I think at best you're probably talking about a middle round guy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The steals have been going up as of late, and I think that's what's kind of helping his value more recently. I think to compare it to what he did in New York is almost unfair because of just how good he was and how large of a role he had. So, yeah, I wouldn't say similar value, but I still think he'll be good.
All right. Bane and Porzingis or Jalen Williams? Which side do you guys prefer? Yeah, I'll take J-Dub there.
I'll take the healthy basketball player.
Yeah.
who's also been very, very good.
Yeah. Yep. I think his value is going to only increase with Chet Holmgren out. So, yeah, I'll take Jalen Williams there. 12-team 9-cat. Can Kelly Olynyk get 20 minutes a game? Is he worth stashing? Ooh.
I think yes to both of those. I mean, Jakob Poeltl's been at 32 minutes per game. I could see him dropping down to 30. Olynyk playing 18 at center and maybe like 2 at power forward and some special situations or scenarios or whatever. So, yeah, 20 minutes per game is realistic, and I think he's kind of shown in the past that especially on teams that aren't playoff teams, he can be very productive in limited minutes. So,
yeah, I think I agree with that. We've seen him in the past do things in limited minutes that make him worth stashing. Excuse me. My team is a hospital. Jeez. Wow. Zion, CJ Alvarado, and Walker Kessler are all out. Leaning towards dropping Alvarado and or Julian Champagnie. I'm assuming that's for 2 out of Melton, Podziemski, Royce O'Neal, Najee Marshall, Kevin Huerter, Alsar Thompson, Karis LeVert, Jake LaRavia, Kyle Lowry, and Nick Richards. Yeah, I definitely drop both of those guys. I think Champagnie's value is going to decrease. You have Stefan Castle playing better, and also Devin Vassell. Alvarado, we spoke about him earlier, dropping as well. Just trying to figure out who of all these players I would consider picking up. I think Melton, for one, for sure, is a guy I would pick, especially if he remains as a starter. And I see no reason why that shouldn't be the case. But the other pick, oh man, I guess Nick Richards, but I'm not really too confident about that. I feel like Melton's the only one that I would definitely grab out of these players listed here.
Well, first of all, I have big news, huge news. Walker Kessler is not injured. He's not on the injury report.
So he's playing. Well,
so that's huge. So we're healthy here. That is
well,
one less
I don't know.
player in the hospital.
No, I think he's out tonight, actually.
So I am looking at an old injury report. Is that what my issue is?
Yes, he is out tonight with right hip soreness. So yeah,
that's bad news for me. So never mind. I thought I was gonna like make things so much better, and I just made it so much worse, including for myself. So that's really cool. Okay, then yeah. So definitely D'Anthony Melton. I'm not feeling great about pods just because the minutes haven't been there. Najee Marshall's been really good with PJ Washington out. I'm fairly certain he's doubtful, unless that's changed since I last looked at the injury report.
He is doubtful. He's still doubtful.
Okay, cool. So that's at least a little bit of value there. Herder should be pretty solid. I mean, we talked about him a little bit earlier. Asar Thompson obviously is just adding to the hospital a little bit. Like he'll be back sooner than I think. Well, maybe not Kessler. I don't really know how long he'll be out, but should be back within the next couple of weeks. Levert's Levert. I think the only other one I would consider is Nick Richards. So definitely Melton. I don't know. Maybe I would go Royce O'Neal with KD out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he can help you now.
I'll do Royce O'Neal.
All right. Lightning round time. So you're short on minutes here. Zagbaji this good. Hard sell high in redraft given his lack of name value, but how do you evaluate him in 9-cat Dynasty?
I don't think he's very good or as good as he has been. So I would say he's definitely a sell high in Dynasty as well. He's just taking advantage of the opportunity.
Fair enough. Derrick Jones Jr. or Jalen Wells, Yahoo head-to-head, 12-team, 15 category. Oh, man. I think
I'll
go Derrick Jones Jr.
Jones.
Yeah.
I like just safer about the role.
Rank Oubre, Risache, and Castle rest of the season 9-cat. I think I go Risache, Castle, and then Oubre, personally.
Yeah, I agree. You said Risache, Castle, Oubre?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with who knows how long DeAndre Hunter is going to be out. Yeah, Risache first.
All right. Traded Garland and Vassell for Cade Cunningham and Kuzma. Did I lose on this one? Oh, man.
I
don't know.
I think I would prefer the Garland Vassell side.
Yeah. I don't think you lost it definitively, but I would just prefer holding on to Garland and Vassell.
Yeah.
All right. Which current veteran stat set is comparable to Zachary Risache? Klay Thompson. No, I don't really know if I'd say Klay Thompson there.
I think Klay was like a nice, I guess, player comp entering the draft. Like the idea was that he would be a taller Klay Thompson, like a very good floor spacer and good defender. But he's been able to get some more defensive stats than I think I was expecting. So I think it does make the defensive, I guess the 9-cat comparison a little bit more. I don't know. Does Jaden McDaniels work? I mean, I don't remember. I haven't looked at his numbers off the top of my head for this year, but I know there was a point where he was averaging like right around a steal, a block, and a 3, and that's pretty much what Risache is averaging. It's pretty similar to what he's averaging this year as well. So
yeah,
I'll do Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, I think that's fair because Klay, you're talking about like an all-time player in terms of his role. I don't know if we've seen enough from Risache to put him in that class. In terms of his progression. So yeah, I'm not going to say that. Let's see. We're going to go to the last question here. What do you guys think I should do with Norman Powell? I think I would hold because I know it doesn't feel realistic in terms of season-long value, but as we discussed earlier, we don't know when or if Kawhi Leonard will play basketball this season. So I would hold Norman Powell.
I wouldn't. I'd try and trade him, but I don't have an issue with holding him. I think he's obviously been very good. I don't think that's going to slow down, but I feel more confident or comfortable with somebody else that's close by him in rankings. Now, that's probably not going to work with a 1-to-1 trade. Like just for example, Jalen Williams and Luka Doncic are the next two after him. Like I don't think that somebody would trade you either of those guys for Norm Powell. So it's an interesting one. I don't know exactly what name I would be looking for, but I would be trying to sell high if I can.
Fair enough. I tend to be hesitant to sell high on guys. So like I need to get.
Yeah.
I know. I'm always worried about what happens if I trade them and they continue to blow up. But
yeah, I think this one's interesting because he is like an older prospect. It's not like prospect. He's an older player. So it's not like he's a 23-year-old that's having a breakout season and sell high. So I don't know. I think Kawhi's return would limit him. I think that there's a chance that his percentages drop a little bit and his ranking takes a dramatic hit. But I also don't think anybody's going to trade you a true second round value for him. So you probably are just going to end up having to ride it out because anybody that would be willing to trade somebody for him, they're not going to trade somebody that would, I guess, be worth trading for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to conclude this podcast. Thanks again for Noah coming on, and thank you all to all your questions and comments. Always appreciated. Enjoy the games tonight. Start of the Emirates NBA Cup.
Ooh.